right, good morning. Okay, we are learning Leila Nishmas Mindel Mariam Bas Kalman Reuven and Shabbos Shavna Aliyah. Okay, so we are on Pei Gimel Amud Beis, right? Pei Gimel Amud Beis by Rav Chama Bar Guria. Yeah, it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines down, or if you're in English, it's 83b1, and where the new section begins, okay? So, Bar Rav Chama Bar Guria, Avodah Zara Yeshna Leivarim Eina Leivarim, okay? So, we've been talking about Tumah and relating to Avodah Zara. Let's say you have Avodah Zara that is disassembled, okay? So, what does it mean? Disassembled meaning you have Avodah Zara that was created as, you buy something from like IKEA or something, it has like disassembled parts, and you put it together, and, let's say the parts disassemble, okay? So they're not right. Well, let me say it like this: you kind of take the avodah zara out of the box. You haven't attached it yet. Okay, so you bought your avodah zara. Let's think about like the ancient world. Like people were like selling these idols. So let's say a person buys the idol, but I haven't assembled the idol yet. Is it mekabel tuma? Does it receive tuma or not? The disassembled limbs, the disassembled parts, is it susceptible to tuma or not? So the Gemara says like this: if it's a situation where a layman, a regular person who's not a builder, like us, if we're able to put it together, then then certainly it's considered like it's intact. Meaning, even though it's not intact right now, but since it's so simple to put together that just a layman, just you and I, are able to do it, that's not a question. When is there a question? Where you need a professional to build it, where a layman is not able to build it. What's the halacha? And now here the Gemara is going to lay out the two possibilities. Do we say that since a regular person is unable to put it together, is as if it's broken, and therefore there is no susceptibility to tuma? Or at the end of the day, since all the parts are there, it's just that it's not attached, therefore we see it as if it's whole, and therefore it does generate tuma. Okay, so the way the Gemara now is explaining the question, although we'll see another version in a second, is that the Gemara is saying that when something is disassembled and it takes a professional to assemble it, do we say that since it's not easily put together, therefore we perceive it as separate, and therefore if something touches it, then it's not mekabel tuma, because to be mekabel tuma has to be really an item? Or do we say at the end of the day, nothing's missing from it, it's just not together, and therefore it is mekabel tuma? Okay, that's one way of asking the question. Before the Gemara answers it, the Gemara has another version of the question. Vika de bailach, or 83b2, for those on the article, Vika de bailach lahach gisa. There are those who ask the question in the following fashion, and they say like this, a different version. In a situation where a regular person is unable to put it together, there's no question. Then everyone would agree that it's broken. When is there a question? Where a regular person is able to attach it. What's the halacha? Do we say that since a regular person is able to reassemble it, it's as if it's intact, and therefore it's able to be give off tuma? Or do we say that since now it's pulled apart and dismantled, it's not attached, therefore it's not really a thing, and therefore it's not going to generate tuma? Teku, the Gemara leaves it off as a question. Okay, so basically the Gemara, has two versions of this question, but ultimately it leaves this question unresolved. The basic question revolving around when avodah zara, as we've established, is something which generates tuma, right? That there is a rabbinic decree that all forms of avodah zara is something. If you touch avodah zara, you're makabel tuma, you receive tuma. The question is when it's something which is avodah zara which is disassembled. Depends on the, is it going to be able to generate tuma, and the question is left unresolved. Okay, yeah.
Is there any practical relevance of this concept that's applied to anything besides
avodah zara?
Yeah.
The notion of something. Well, we have I guess a similar concept that comes to mind is sometimes you have a concept that plays a role in different halachos of like something which is fit to be mixed is like it's mixed, like when two things are together, right? So called bila, so we do have this notion that when the steps to get to the conclusion are not yet there, but we do, because it's so simple, we do see it as if it's there already. So you have a similar concept playing a role in other halachos. Okay, another question about avodah zara and tuma. Bayrav achadvai bar ami avodah zara pchusa mikazayis mahu. What's the halacha regarding an idol that is smaller than a kazayas? Is it kazayas again as an olive? What's the halacha regarding an avodah zara that's smaller than an olive? Is it considered an idol or not? Okay, so maskef l'Rav Yosef. Yosef asks a question on the question. He says, Lamai, what are you asking about? If your question is it forbidden to there's a isser hana, there's a prohibition against having any benefit from avodah zarah. You're not supposed to have any benefit from avodah zarah. There are many, we think of avodah zarah as just simply you're not supposed to serve avodah zarah. There are a whole bunch of halachos regarding avodah zarah. You're not supposed to appreciate the beauty of avodah zarah, which sometimes is challenging. You go to certain places, you see a beautiful what looks like a beautiful church or a beautiful things like that. You're not supposed to appreciate the beauty. Also, you're not supposed to benefit in any way from something which is idolatrous, right? So is the question that are you not allowed about benefits? Is that the question? He says certainly that's there's no question about it. Why? Lo yehei ela zvuv bal ikron. Ekron. It should be no different than Zvuv, the idol of Ekron. What is Zvuv, the idol of Ekron? So in Shoftim, the Torah tells us that the Jewish people were serving an idol called Zvuv, or Baal Zvuv. We'll see the pasuk in a second. Let's see the pasuk actually first. So he says, Titania, we have a brayso. It says like this: Veisim lehem Baal Bris lelohim. That they made this thing called Baal Bris for God over them. Okay, so that's a pasuk in Shoftim that says that the Jewish people made Baal Bris as a god over them. We'll talk about that idol in a moment. Zez Zvuv Baal Ekron. This is what is this a reference to? It's a reference to Zvuv, the idol of Ekron. The idea of being called Baal Bris, a covenant seems like a very close connection. So what does that teach us? It teaches that each person made their own image of it. Okay, and they keep it in their pockets. Whenever they would think about it, they would take it out of their pockets or their purse, and they would hug it and kiss it. Okay, so the point is that you see very clearly that this thing, which as we'll establish in a second, we'll talk about in a second, is very small, is still considered a full-fledged idol. Okay, so what is this thing? So the simple understanding is it's called a zvuv. Zvuv means a fly. Okay, so the simple understanding is Baal Bris, which is referred to over here, is an idol that is the size of a fly, and that's the proof that you see something which is very small is considered an idol. It's worth noting that the fact that it's called Baal Bris. Baal is a term you'll find over and over again. You'll see it again in this week's parsha. That Baal was the most prominent idol worship that took place in that area, and part of the issue with this idol is that it also was associated with a form of sexual immorality. There are those who understand Baal Bris is not something that it looks like a fly, but rather Baal Bris it's something which looks like the space of the area of circumcision. Baal Bris, the idea of circumcision, and the understanding was that Baal, there's Baal, the way that they served Baal, oftentimes included some form of sexuality, and therefore they had kadeshos, they had prostitutes that were involved in the service. It wasn't just avodah zarah, it wasn't just idolatry, but it was also something which was closely associated with adultery as well, and that's the idol of Baal Bris. Okay, one way or another, the point is that this is something which is tiny, and yet it is seen as avodah zarah. So quite clearly, if the question is there avodah zarah, is there prohibition about avodah zarah for something which is very small? Yeah, because we have an avodah zarah which is very small, and it's considered avodah zarah, it's considered a problem. So clearly, there is an issue of avodah zarah which is very small. Ella l'inyan tuma. It must be the question was not about whether it's forbidden or not. The question is, does it generate tuma? We were talking about before that avodah zarah, if you come into contact with avodah zarah, then you are tameh. Will the tuma be generated for an avodah zarah that's very small? That's the question. So, what's the halacha? So it says the Gemara explaining the question. Kivan de iskish l'sheretz. Do we say that since the idol is compared to a sheretz, masheretz, because right, there are psukim as we saw earlier that compare avodah zarah to a sheretz. A sheretz, right, is this little creature. Masheretz b'kadasha, af avodah zarah nami kadasha, and therefore we could say that just like a sheretz is going to generate tuma, even if it's the size of a lentil, tiny, so too avodah zarah. Odilma ha'iskish lameis. Or do we say that also avodah zarah is compared to a corpse? Ma meis b'kazayis, avodah zarah b'kazayis. Just as a corpse will only generate somewhere the size of an olive, meaning kazayis, so too an idol will only generate tuma the size of an olive, right? So therefore the Gemara is leaving it as a question. That's the question, okay? And the Gemara is going to give an answer. Amar of Avia v'tema rabba var'ula tashma d'tanya avodah zarah b'chusa b'kazayis aim ba tuma kol ikar. Okay, so while avodah zarah, even no matter how small it is, you can have an avodah zarah the size a micro avodah zarah, it can be tiny. You'll still be chayav for serving it, and it'll still be prohibited to benefit from it. But in terms of its ability to generate tuma, if it's smaller than a kazayis, the Bryce is telling us over over here, it doesn't generate tuma. Shenemar, as it says, vayashlech esafara al kever b'nei ha'am, and he threw the dust upon the graves of the people. Okay, so he threw the dust of the avodah zarah. They ground it up. Yoshia, the king of Yisrael, wanted to eradicate all of avodah zarah. And what he did is that he took all of avodah zarah, he ground it up into dust, and then he threw it over the graves of the people. Okay, so and the Gemara learns ma mace bekazayas, the juxtaposition between the avodah zarah and the graves of the people, is to teach us that just like the tumah of a mace is with the kazayas, the size of an olive, af avodah zarah bekazayas, so too the tumah of avodah zarah is going to be the size of an olive. So we've established that avodah zarah, doesn't matter how small an avodah zarah is, it still could be prohibited. But in terms of the tumah, it has to be the size of kazayas in order for it to generate tumah. Okay, now we go back to a discussion we saw earlier about Rav Elazar. We had a debate between Rav Elazar and Rabbah about some of the laws of the tumah, the laws of tumah of avodah zarah. We're going to just have one final discussion about that. So the Gemara says like this: V'Rabbanan, according to the Rabbanan, within the view of Rabbi Elazar, lamai hilchasa iskish l'sharetz. So if you recall, I'd be impressed if you recall, but we had Rabbi Elazar and Rabbah have a debate about what we have a Rabbi and Rabbi Elazar had a debate about what the Rabbanan and Rabbi Kiva were arguing about regarding the tumah of avodah zarah. Okay, and according to Rabbi Elazar's version of the Chacham of the Rabbanan, the reason that avodah zarah is compared to a sheretz is to teach us that just like a sheretz, you'll only become tameh by touching it, but not by carrying it. So to avodah zarah and lenida. And why was avodah zarah compared to a nida? De'ena levarim, that just like a nida will not transfer tumah if there is a disassembled limb, so to avodah zarah, if the limb is disassembled, it's not going to generate tumah. And lemeis, and why is avodah zarah compared to a corpse? Delo matama mikadasha, to teach us that you need a kazayas and not a lentil. Okay, but what comes out is that according to Rav Elazar, the things that we're learning are all leniencies. Right? To say it's like a sheretz, that just like a sheretz, you will not be matame by carrying it, so to avodah zarah. Just like a nida, you will not become tameh by a limb, so to this, right? Each thing is a leniency. Ask the Gemara, im l'chumra. But you could say all these comparisons could be seen as stringencies. What does that mean? Why doesn't he say that the reason? Why is the reason that the Torah compares an idol to sheretz to say that you'll be tameh the size of a lentil? And why is it compared to a nida to generate tumah even in the case of a placed rock we spoke about earlier, which a nida does cause tumah in that case. And akshar rachmana lameis, let's move it oil. And maybe the reason the Torah compares the idol to a corpse is to teach it to transmit tumah by way of tumas oil. Tumas oil means that if there's a corpse in this room, then everything in this room is tameh. So the point is that the Torah compares avodah zarah to these three things. Why is Rav Elazar's version of the Rabbanan looking for all the leniencies? Why not the stringencies? So Gemara answers, tumas avodah zarah d'Rabbanan hi. The tumah of an idol is rabbinic. In other words, in the Torah itself, it does not say that avodah zarah is tameh. It's something the Rabbanan instituted. V'kula v'chumra, and therefore you have both kulas, leniencies, and stringencies in front of you. L'kula makshinan, it makes sense since it's all rabbinic that we're going to draw the analogies regarding leniencies. L'chumra l'makshinan, we're not going to draw the analogies to teach stringencies. So he's explaining why we come out with all these leniencies as opposed to stringencies, because of the fact that it's all rabbinic. Okay? Adkan, that's the end of our discussion of avodah zarah. We are not done discussing tumah. So again, as I said when we started this chapter, at the start of the 9th chapter, this chapter goes into a couple of cases where all the Mishnayos begin with the words minayin, like from where. Okay, and eventually, I guarantee you, we'll get back to the laws of Shabbos, but we're going to get to a little bit more of a discussion of something else about tumah and tara. Okay? Still with me? Yeah, go ahead.
I have a similar question to what I was asking before.
Mm-hmm.
Do we use this similar type of reasoning about how the notes even say that we're learning from Nevi'im, right? We're not even using verses from the Torah. Do we use that similar type of it's only coming from the Nevi'im and it's not? Is that?
Well, it's not because it's coming from the Nevi'im, right? Is that right?
Because it's not specifically mentioned in the.
Right. It's not. You're right. So it's rabbinic. Right.
Right. So I don't know
the notion.
It's not given the same. It's still Tanakh. It's not given the same level of credibility in terms of being a.
So again, let me. I think I just want to be. The Tumah of Avodah Zarah is not learnt from the Nevi'im per se. It's learnt from the Chacham are the ones who institute it, and the sources that they use are sources in Tanakh which are certainly not going to be, we're not called bona fide sources, meaning that's a stop, meaning whenever we talk about any halacha is only going to be learned, like any doraisa halacha is only going to be learned from 5 books of Moshe, from the Chumash, and not from the Nevi'im. Right. Okay. Says the Mishnah, Minan l'sfina shi tahora. Okay, what about a ship? So it says, how do we know that a ship is not susceptible to becoming tameh? Okay, very interesting halacha. The halacha is that you could have a mace on a boat, you could have a sheretz touch a boat, and the boat will remain tahar. The boat remains not susceptible, the boat remains tahar. Shenemar, what's the pasuk that could demonstrate this? Derech aniyah belev yam, that the path of a ship is in the heart of the sea. Okay, so what does that mean? The way that let's see the Gemara. The Gemara is going to unpack this a little bit. Pshita, the Gemara says aniyah b'lev yami. It's obvious that the ship is in the heart of the sea. In other words, what is Shlomo HaMelech teaching me by saying that the ship is in the heart of the sea? The heart of the sea means like the heart just means like in the middle. Ships go in the middle of the sea. Shkayach, like we know that. Okay, so Hakamash wants to teach us kiyam that it's just like the sea. Ma yam tahar, just like the sea is not susceptible to tuma. There's no way to make a sea tameh. Af sfina tahora, so too a ship is not susceptible to tuma. Okay? Bottom line is that we see a juxtaposition between the boat and the sea to tell me that it's not susceptible to tuma, and therefore we learn from here that a boat is not susceptible to tuma. However, we're going to see another source, another possible reason, or another possible source to say that a ship is not metame, but based on the different sources, we'll see there is an afkamina, there is a difference in practical halacha. Okay, so let's turn the page. Tanya, we learned in a brisa, Hanani Omer, Nilmada Misak, that we're going to learn that a ship is not susceptible to tuma from a sack. Okay, because like this, in the Torah, where it describes the different materials that become tameh, it says wood, and then next to wood it says sack. Okay, so a sack is like something like a bag. Masak metalta male v'rekan, just like a sack is something which is carried both while it's filled with objects and while it's empty. Av kol metalta male v'rekan. Any vessel, any wooden vessel that is going to become tameh has to be something that can be carried both while it's empty and while it's full. A boat is not carried when it is full and empty. Okay, it's only carried when it's empty. In other words, if you could, be schlepping a boat on dry, on dry land or whatever it is, you'll only carry it when it's empty. Once you start putting items in it, it's impossible to carry. It's too big, it's too heavy, and therefore it's not carried. Okay, so now boats back in the day were entirely made of wood. And therefore, what the Torah is teaching us is that just like a sack is only tameh when it's anything which is like a sack, which is carried both full and empty, is tameh. A boat which is not carried while it's full is not going to be tameh. Okay, so my b'nai, ask the Gemara, what's the difference between the approach of the Chachamim who learn it from the pasuk of belev yam that simply because it's in the sea, that's why it's not going to be tameh, and Hanania who says we learn it from sack. So one difference will be a ship made from something other than wood, like earthenware, for example. According to the first opinion that we saw in the Mishnah, that the reason that it's not susceptible to tumah is because it's a ship in the heart of the sea, we'll say hanami v'lev yami. Any ship that goes in the water is going to be tahora. So whether it's made of earthenware or nowadays made of like metals or whatever it is, it's going to be tahora. But if the whole thing is because of an analogy to sak, hanach tichsivi gabe sak, it's only going to include those things which are written next to sack, right? In ilolo. And then we'll say if it's carried both while empty and full, yes, and if not, not. Even though it's not carried while it's laden and while it's empty, at the end of the day, the pasuk there does not talk about earthenware, and it doesn't juxtapose it to sack, and therefore, an earthenware ship will become tameh. And similarly, we'll say nowadays, like a metal ship will become tameh. Okay, that's one difference. Inami sfina sayarden. Another difference between them will be a small boat, a boat that goes in the Jordan River. The Jordan River is a very small river. If you've been to the Jordan recently, it's even smaller than it was then, but it's like now, I don't know, depends when you go. It could be like a stream. But the point is, like, it's very small. So, Lamandamar aniyav lev yamhi, hanami aniyav lev yamhi. If you want to say that it's about being in the middle of the sea, okay, so it doesn't matter how big the water is. It's a small boat, a boat that goes in the Jordan River, it's still in the heart of the sea. But according to the opinion who says it's a boat that will not be carried while it's full or empty, a small boat you could carry while it's full or empty. In other words, it's small enough that people will move it around. And why did the Chachamim say that a boat that's in the Jordan is susceptible to tuma, because people load it up with cargo while it's in the land, while it's still on that land, and then they lower it into the water. In other words, it's small enough that it's okay to fill it up with items. So the two nafkaminas between these two opinions in terms of what the source of tuma or non-tuma for a boat is. Either it's learned from the pasuk comparing it to, if it's based on the pasuk comparing it to sack, then that's only going to include wood, but not other materials like earthenware or metal. And also, the whole comparison to sack is whether it'll be something which is filled up while it's filled up while it's empty, or filled up, that you'll carry it while it's empty, or carry it while it's full. So small boats will become tameh as opposed to large boats. Okay. Now we have two just comments about what just happened. Amar Yudah Marav La'olam al Yimna Adam es Atam Beis HaMedrash Vafilu Sha'achas. A person should never absent themselves from the house of study even for a moment. Okay. But why? Shari Kama Shanim Nishnes Mishnah Zo Beis HaMedrash. This halacha that a small boat will not become tameh was taught many times in the Beis HaMedrash. But no one knew the reason. In other words, this halacha was taught. Everyone knew a small boat does not become tameh, but absolutely no one knew the reason. One day, Reb Chanina ben Akavya came and told us this reason. And now, the reason that because it could be carried while it's full on dry land, etc., etc. But no one knew the reason. One day, you never know what day, that gem of a Torah teaching is going to come. You could be in the middle of a very, very, very long discussion about Tuman Tara. You could be going out of your mind, but there might be a little gem in the middle that might be super relevant. I would have never known this because I was going to skip because I was tired of learning Tuman Tara. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Rav Yochanan, Yonasan, excuse me, says Rav Yonasan, now a similar structure statement. A person should not absent themselves from the house of study, nor even from words of Torah, even at the moment of death. Meaning we need to learn Torah, no matter what. Shenemar, Zos Torah Adam Kiyamas Ba'oel, Filu B'Shas Misa Tehe Osek. So the pasuk says, we saw this a few weeks ago. This Parshas Chukas it says Zos Torah, right? This is the Torah, and then the next pasuk says Adam Kiyamas Ba'oel. It starts teaching about a person who dies in the tent. But the way Chazal learn it is Zos Torah. This is the way to connect the Torah. Adam Kiyamas Ba'oel. That even when a person is on their deathbed, they should be learning Torah. Fil b'shas misa Torah, a person should be studying Torah, and no matter what, right? No matter what. And similarly, he says not only is it incumbent upon us to learn Torah, even when we are at the verge of death. I'll just share. I think I've shared this with somebody in the past. I remember seeing learning in the Mir Yeshiva, Rav Nassan. Rav Nassan Tzvi Finkel, thank you. Had Parkinson's, extreme and he didn't take medication for it because the way I understood it is that it impacts a person's memory and impacts a person's brain. He wanted to be able to learn without any distraction, but he was constantly. It's tiresome. It's extremely tiresome to be having these movements, these jerking movements that are happening to all the time. Like when I got my entrance exam, he was lying down on a bed. He was went to his house, he'd be lying down on a bed. They put a bed in the main room, and that's how he would give his bechina. But one day he came to the yeshiva he'd give a weekly, or every few weeks he'd give a shir klali, he'd give a shir to everyone. It was in Yiddish. Didn't understand a word. Out of respect, I'd stay there, but I would put a gemara, learn something under the desk, right? That's causing trouble, back, when you're in the mirror. Okay, whatever it is. And basically, but he went one time giving the shir, and the elevator was broken. They had to carry him up 4 flights of stairs. It was a lot. And he was giving the shir, and I was listening in the background. He's getting slower and slower and slower, and then he heard him mutter I can't, and he just basically collapsed. Okay, and basically, but he was teaching literally up to the last drop, up to, it wasn't I have a bad day, I'm tired, I'm staying home. He went till he couldn't go anymore. That was the extent, and that's what he's saying over here. Even in the moments of death, okay, Baruch Hashem, he didn't literally die, but the point is he didn't stop until he literally was forced to stop in terms of his exertion. Okay, that was my model in terms of what it means to be memes atzmo, to push yourself. This is what was saying, and Rish Lakish adds a line to that. He says, "Ein divrei Torah miskaimen." If you want to really retain Torah, elam misha memes atzma aleha, you have to, so to speak, kill yourself over it. Shneimar zos Torah adam. Again, that same pasuk, this is the Torah of a man who dies in the tent. The idea being that in order for Torah really to make a difference, it's not, if a person's learning Torah casually, you're not going to retain it. Torah is different than any other type of study. It's something which, the Maharal explains that Torah is spiritual, relaxing is physical, and the two don't combine. In other words, a person has to really exert themselves. Without exerting yourself, it's not really going to last, because we're still in a state of being like human and material, and they're just, the two are two separate. So unless a person really exerts themselves, really pushes beyond their physical means, like does something, and I have to push myself to come here, I have to push myself to understand, that's the only way that Torah is able to get past our regular physical limitations and really make a difference and really stick with us. Mitzvah Hashem, we should be able to tap into that. Okay, have a great day.